Welcome everyone to the next episode of the Care CEO Success Stories podcast. My name is Adam James of Spring Up PR, and today I am delighted to say that we have on the podcast Joanne Balmer. She is CEO of Oakland Care, which is a multi-award winning provider of 8 coming on 9 care homes in the southern counties. Joanne is well known in the sector, and she will be talking about how to build sustainability, real sustainability into your care provider. So it's going to be a great episode. Make sure you take notes and listen, and that would be wonderful. Now, as I say, my name's Adam James of Spring Up PR. What we do is help care providers get the fame and recognition they deserve via PR and marketing techniques in order ultimately to attract the interest of more self-funding families or recruiting dream care teams. And if you head over to springup-pr.com, you'll see a whole load of case studies, videos, webinars that will hopefully get you inspired. So, as I say again, we have Joanne here on the podcast, and I'm delighted to have you here, Joanne. Why don't you start off by telling everyone, Joanne, a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Sure, thanks, Adam. As Adam said, I'm Joanne. I'm Chief Executive of Oakland Care. I've been with the company since August 2019. We started off relatively small. There were 3 open homes when I joined. And as Adam also alluded to, we've got 8 open homes now. The 9th opens in April, and a further pipeline of construction projects at various stages, which will open over the next few years.
Yeah, very, very exciting. So we're going to be focusing on sustainability today, and Oakland has demonstrably been noticed for what it's been doing on the sustainability front, and Joanne's going to be talking about that today. But let's maybe start off with the question, which is, if a care provider is thinking about bringing genuine sustainability policies and procedures and strategies into itself as a care provider, where does it start?
I think the first thing that I would recommend that other providers do is to speak to their team members and their residents, because one thing that we've learned over our journey, which has been a progression over the last 3 years, is very much that it's our people that drive the journey. And I am confident that had we done a top-down approach where we had maybe engaged some consultants, come up with a really snazzy strategy and started to try and push policies and change into the care homes, I'm absolutely confident that we would not be nowhere near the position that we are today. The reason why we have made so much progress is because that our team members and our residents are incredibly passionate about it, and they drive the agenda for us. The leadership team bring it together and help to orchestrate all the different parts into a strategy to execute what our teams want to do. So I would say your people are your biggest asset, and it needs to come from them, not top down.
Yeah, and just looking at your website and your achievements, what you've been doing on the sustainability front over the recent years, when a care provider starts to think about this, what kind of things do they need to think about? What kind of measurements, what kinds of goals do they need to be looking at to achieve?
Of course, for everybody, the ultimate goal is to reach net zero. But for the vast majority of businesses, the concept of becoming net zero, whether that's 2030 or later, seems so unachievable and far away. I would say to start small. Really look at where you are today and what are the things that you can do within the resource that you've got. When I say resource, I mean both people resource, time resource, as well as financial resource. Because some of the things that we've done over the last 3 years have required some significant financial investment. And of course, not all providers are going to be in a position where they're going to have the luxury to be able to do some of those things when they're already facing significant operational challenges around staffing costs, rising cost of living and bills, etc. But not everything costs a lot of money. So it's about looking at, rather than doing nothing or being slightly cautious or perhaps wary because this concept of net zero seems so unachievable, it's to think about starting small. Where are we today? and what are the things that we could do in the next 12 months within our various resources in order to make a difference.
And how do you even measure this, your carbon footprint, let's say, or your carbon score? How do you even go about measuring that?
Well, we worked with Carbon Neutral Britain, who were the agency that we engaged in order to offset our carbon emissions, and they helped us to calculate that. And of course, that's largely looking at the things that we're doing within our current business, such as mileage and utility usage. But there are different ways of measuring your emissions, not just around what's happening within your business, but also much wider than that, and called scope 1, 2, 3, and even moving on to scope 4 emissions. We are now at the point where we're looking at scope 3 emissions, which means we're looking at, well, what is our procurement chain doing? How, not just how they deliver to us, but what are they doing when they're not delivering to us? How low are their emissions? And how can we impact the behaviour of our team members when they go home? And how can we help them to live a more sustainable life when they're at home? So it's about branching outside of your day-to-day business. But certainly there are lots of tools out there that people can find on the internet, or you can do lots of different agencies, and Carbon Neutral Britain is one of them, that will help you to calculate all the different elements of how your business is contributing to carbon emissions. And then the second part of that is then how you reduce those emissions. Whether that's because you can physically reduce them, and if you can't physically reduce them, how you can offset them.
So, a decision, a momentum is started to come on board about, okay, we're going to make efforts to reduce our carbon footprint, carbon neutral goal. How does that all start? And you talk about bringing the people in. How does that start from beginning to like the first steps in practice?
And the process of offsetting and becoming carbon neutral is pretty quick, pretty straightforward, but of course it does cost money. In terms of the reduction of your emissions, I think I'd say the most important thing is to get your team members engaged, but also to have fun whilst you're doing it. So a lot of what we also do is engaging in local community projects to improve the local environment. So we go out into the community and we plant trees. We'll go out and beach cleans. We'll go out and do litter picks. And it's not just the staff that are doing it, it's also the residents. When our staff are doing it, they're not doing it through volunteer time. The company is funding that time. It's part of our investment from Oakland Care into caring for our local communities.
I see.
But when I then see them, and I've been on lots of these different events, but then when I also see the pictures of other teams out and about and doing different things, let's say whether it's a woodland walk with the residents cleaning litter as they go, people are having great fun and enjoying what they're doing, and that's what motivates them, seeing the difference that they're making, having fun, and seeing and being part of the local community.
And tell me more about what you've learned, which you alluded to from the very beginning, about bringing, encouraging and developing that support and initiative and ideas from the ground up, and how the leadership team is involved and how your teams on the ground are involved in that process. Tell me more about how you felt that's gone with for Oakland, and what recommendations you would have generally.
When this first started back in very early 2020, it was because we conducted our annual staff survey. And we didn't solicit information about sustainability. It wasn't even one of the questions. What we picked up was a key theme in the qualitative feedback from those surveys, that team members were asking us questions as leaders as to why we weren't doing more. And I think this stemmed really from the fact that they had certain behaviours perhaps in their own home environment, such as recycling waste, and then they came to work and they'd see a bin where waste wasn't segregated. They'd be saying to us, well, why do we do this at home and it's the right thing to do, but you're not doing it here? And so that was what really was the catalyst to starting our journey. Oh, that's quite right. I'd only just come in as CEO. We really should start to think about what we can do here. Moving then into the following year, once we've made some simple changes, we then set up a sustainability committee, and each of our care homes has got representatives on that sustainability committee, and that will actually be doubling in size as we enter into 2023. And they are the working group really that are driving, monitoring the change. We do have board to floor reporting, so I report to the board on our progress on a monthly basis. operational head of business services who leads on sustainability, reports to the executive team on a monthly basis. We have communication apps with all of our team members on it that we write out different messages and updates around sustainability, as well as the sustainability committee feeding back to their own departments or their own care home. So it's a continuous communication and engagement process for us. And that's really important. So, only not yesterday, day before, I was speaking at an event on sustainability. And so when I'm on the way home on the train, I put a photo on the little app and I say to the team, this is what I've been doing today. I had great enjoyment telling all of the attendees about all the great things that you've been doing. Some special shout outs. So it's a constant communication and dialogue with team members to keep them engaged and inspired.
Let me just be absolutely clear as well. But you kind of got the T-shirt, so to speak, on sustainability, because you are the first care provider, as far as I understand, to be certified as carbon neutral.
Certainly the first group of care homes.
Great. And so it's very interesting that it came actually from a survey, and it was that led to the innovation. And we were talking before we pressed record on the show about caring, obviously, for residents is the ultimate reason why we are all in the care sector, but then how that reflects on the environment as well. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, when I talk to our team members and people externally, I describe it as it's not a project doing sustainability. It's not an add-on function. It is what I consider to be a social movement within our organisation. But the real why as to why we do this, apart from just summing it up as it's the right thing to do, is that as a care provider, I don't believe that we can truly demonstrate that we care for our people, and by people I mean both residents and team members that work and live with us, unless you also care for the environment in which they live, because they hand in hand. And so it's the right thing to do, and it's our responsibility both for our local communities and our people, as well as the wider global change on tackling climate change, to do what we do and to constantly move forward in improving what we do on sustainability and reducing our impact towards net zero. We will be completing our piece of work over the summer period this year to set our full detailed goals and our journey out to net zero. So that will be launching as we move into Q3. We've made significant changes. If I mentioned before about waste segregation, we now have the smallest proportion of our waste goes to landfill. The only waste that goes to landfill is clinical waste, which has been generated by used continence products. And even that has been reduced by 30%. All of our other waste does not go to landfill. Our general waste is incinerated to create electricity. Our mixed recycling is separated and sold for processing. Our offensive waste is shredded, then treated, and the final product is then used as waste for energy. Our food is then sold and recycled for methane, for fertilizer and fuel. Electric items go to the third world or go to charity. Newspapers are recycled or got used by vets and then recycled. Better than linen is recycled. But everything is recycled as much as possible to reduce the impact on what's going to landfill, which is a huge achievement from when I think where we were when our team members first raised it.
I can appreciate that, and it's such I guess a model of you can do it for not only just care providers listening, but for any organisation or business. I mean, it's a bottom down initiative, and you've obviously given that, said we'll take that on board and we'll run with it, and there
are other more recent things which again team members have been really influential in inspiring. In January we ran Veganuary, I think that's how you pronounce it, where we developed with our residents and team members plant-based menus, which yes we served alongside the traditional choices, but giving people more options to choose plant-based options maybe once or twice a week will also to reduce the impact on the environment. Changing our cooking methods to, we're looking at installing and purchasing commercial air fryers, which use a lot less electricity and have a lot less impact, rather than traditional ways of cooking, which is also healthier. There is a lot we have done, but there's a lot more we can do. And it's one of those things where the more that you do, the more ideas that you suddenly think of and think, well, actually, just because we've always done that way, why do we still need to do it that way?
Yeah.
And clinical waste, again, alluded to that. We've reduced the amount of that goes to landfill by 30%. By the end of this year, at 50%. And the reason for that in clinical waste from continence products, as you know, is unavoidable. It would be a fantastic thing if people didn't need to use continence products anymore, but unless there's an innovation in the offing that nobody's yet aware of, I'm not sure that's in the short term. But what we have done is invested in technology that vacuum packs and condenses down the amount of actual space that waste takes in landfill. So not only does it mean a much cleaner and safer environment in the care home, the amount of waste that goes to landfill is much reduced. I'd say we expect to hit 50% reduction by the end of this year. And also that will give us better efficiencies as a care provider in the long term, because we're not paying as much to have the waste taken away. It also has a secondary impact on the environment, because the lorry that comes to take the waste away isn't coming as frequently, meaning there are less emissions on the road. So there's a huge knock-on impact of everything. Every little initiative that we do has direct and indirect wider consequences on the environment.
Yeah, no, I love this. And I think if you can start to change what people do, even as by 10-15%, those are percentage differences over time just are compounded. And I guess the message I'm hearing now is that when you may start thinking, oh my goodness, what a mountain to climb. But once you have that momentum and the energy and the interest to start to look at all those smaller things. So we'll come on to the investments and the money side in a moment, but it's like many things, I guess, Joanne. I don't know what you think about this. It's just like, okay, we're actually going to start to tackle this and do our best. And once you make that decision to do that, then you start to go on the journey develops its own momentum.
Well, one of the things we did do last year was we launched a new section of our website dedicated to sustainability. That tells people exactly what we say we do around sustainability and what our 15 targets are. And that's really important because we monitor our progress against that on a quarterly basis, and we will be reporting against it publicly on an annual basis. And holding yourself to account as a leader is critical. Allowing your people in your business to hold you to account for that is also quite important to keep you on track.
Yeah.
One of our targets is to plant at least 1,000 trees a year. I can actually say that we had such an overwhelming response to people volunteering for tree planting events in January that by the 26th of January, we already planted 1,100 trees.
Oh, wow.
So we've already this year totally exceeded our allies' target, which is a massive improvement even from last year. So by the time we've got some other tree planting events planned later in the year, because they tend to happen over the winter period, I expect us to be hitting, in excess of 2,000 trees rather than the initial target of 1,000.
Yeah, no, that's fabulous. And I can imagine that it's well regarded from families of residents. Is that right? What kind of feedback have you had from families?
Most definitely. So we have feedback that comes through in our resident and relative survey, which we conduct every year in the October time. We definitely saw that coming through. Client and relationship advisors also that are dealing with people who are inquiring about coming to live with us also report that people are now reading about what we're doing on sustainability on our website. So when they do all of their research before they've even come to visit the home, they've usually read a lot about what we say we do. And then in the home, they're looking to validate that, whether that's through what they see, usually recycling as an example of that, and also through questioning and speaking to the client and relationship manager or the home manager about, I've read on your website that you do these things. Can you show me that? Can you tell me more about that? So I think absolutely it's becoming a more conscious part of the decision-making process as to when let's say sons and daughters and the younger generation that might be making decisions for their older loved ones or choosing the care homes that they want people to live in is how much that provider is doing to help to the local environment.
And just coming on to the money side, I guess some to achieve certain measures will cost a whole lot more money than others. Tell what you've learned and what thoughts and advice you have on the money side of it and the investment. What are the big spends that a care provider may be looking at if they really want to make a big chunk on that carbon, for example?
As is, the biggest level of investments would be around retrospective fitting of alternative technologies. So the use of solar PV, for example. We recently had a quote to put that on one of our older homes, which is just in excess of £150,000. Those are big investments, but there are opportunities to engage with your lenders and banks for sustainability linked loans, where you're able to obtain funding at preferential rates if it's used for green technology. So I'd definitely say to speak to your lender or one of the banks around what options there are for that, if that was something a provider wanted to do. Those would be the biggest investments: solar, air source ground pumps, air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps. And of course, it's much easier for providers to look at those types of technologies if they're putting them into new build schemes, where the cost of them can be costed into the overall development. And yes, that may still mean that the actual cost of the overall development is slightly higher than as traditional gas building, but the impact that it will have on the environment and potentially utility usage over the long term will return that. And then, so coming down from that, we had all of our buildings, all of our freehold buildings certified under BREEAM during the course of 2022, and that really is validating the level of environmentally friendliness of the construction of those buildings, but it also gives us a bespoke by building plan as to what things we could do to further improve that specific site. The cost of a BREEAM assessment, when it's done retrospectively, you're looking at just in excess of around £10,000. So those are fairly chunky investments. Moving down the scale, you've got options for technology that I've just talked around, the clinical waste vacuuming. That would be sort of less than £5,000 per site. And that's certainly going to have an impact. We calculated that will pay us back within around 4 years, as well as having the much longer lasting impact on the environment. So a small one for us that's coming this year, but will have a massive impact, is the use of software for utility tracking. I mean, most of us have got smart meters in our own individual homes, but comes to big care homes with 70, 80 bedrooms, we don't have smart meters, but there is technology out there that can be invested in. And that really is going to give the power into the hands of our local teams, where they'll be able to see exactly how the power that they're using is impacting on utility usage and the environment. And I think that's even more, that will be even more helpful when we've got homes which are in that period between opening and being mature when they're filling. Because so often, if I think back historically, when you've had new builds and there's so many lights on because there's 3 floors, and actually that doesn't need to be like that. LED lighting, careful management of thermostats, cycle to work schemes, electronic invoicing. Do lots of work with our suppliers now. Anybody that's bringing suppliers to us to reduce deliveries, maximum of 2 deliveries a week from our key suppliers. I can say the most difficult to contain is the Amazon man. And this really comes down to also changing the behavior and mindset of the teams in the local homes, because it's just so easy these days to go on an app on the phone. I'll order a jigsaw for Mary on Monday. I need some new batteries on Tuesday. I need a new whiteboard on Wednesday. And before you know it, you've actually really generating a lot of mileage. So we've had to sort around that. And then if you think outside of the buildings as well, we've got we will have biodiversity gardens and areas in all of our homes by the end of this year. Most of them are either there already or in the process of being developed. And in fact, the new builds will have a minimum of 25% of their external space dedicated to biodiversity. We've designed some very interesting biodiversity gardens with Kent Wildlife Trust down at our Maidstone home, Maplewood Court. And in fact, you can see the design of that on our website. What's quite interesting when you look at that is a lot of the features that will contribute to the creation of this wonderful garden are not that expensive to do. So small changes can be made both internally and externally without significant investment.
Very, very interesting. And, it's a nice little checklist there of, from top down in terms of these initiatives that would be involved for providers to have to think about. So thank you. Now, Joanne, is there anything that we've not covered we want to make sure that you convey? Great, good. Well, it's if anything pops to your mind in the next few seconds, let me know, Joanne. But terrific episode, and obviously for all our listeners, the Oakland and Joanne have been, taking a lead on this. So congratulations to them. And Joanne, thank you very much for featuring on the podcast. In fact, I got one. If people want to learn more, where can they do that?
We will be presenting at various conferences this year, Care Show, Care Manager Show,
Yeah.
and there'll be others that come up. But in the meantime, people can just reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. Very happy to help and share information. You can also look at our website where much of what I've talked about is referred to.
Yeah, great. Joanne, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much.